All right, hi everyone. It's great to meet you all. I'm Haley Gabriel, one of the admins of the CBE Voices of Color, and this is Asha Evans, so I'm super excited to be interviewing for you guys today. We know each other through church, so I go to Elm City Vineyard, and she is the family pastor there, and we work with some of the kids together, which has been really awesome. So yeah, I'm really excited to get to interview her for you all. So I'm just going to start by having Asha tell us a little bit about the work that she does, both in the church and then also outside the church.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Haley. This is really an honor. So I'm the family pastor at the Elm City Vineyard Church, and what that means there in that work that I do is that I really want to support families. So to me, I'm thinking not just of kids, but also of their parents and families that come in all different shapes and sizes and configurations. And I want to support them in kind of a season of life or seasons of life that can be really challenging, and that for me, when I got married, when I became a parent, when I went through different seasons even of parenting and I'm still in those, I realized that aspects of my faith kind of shifted and changed too, and the ways that I related to my faith community changed, the ways that I even kind of interacted with God or understood God shifted a little bit, and this was really important to me. And so I realized that for families, I just think it's important that there's people walking alongside them. And I also think that one of my favorite things I love to do is to be with the kids. Their parents are good too, but I really do love to be with the kids. And for me, that's just a really refreshing place, and a place that brings me a lot of joy to be with the kids. So that's part of what I do at the Elm City Vineyard as family pastor. Other aspects of my work just include kind of pastoral care ministry. So I do love being with all people on different journeys in life, whether they're, parents or kids or whoever they are, or not, any of those. And so I have pastoral care kinds of times, regular old staff duties, being part of a church. There's a lot of the work that has to get done, and some of that falls onto my plate as well. And teaching is another thing that I do from time to time that I really enjoy as well. It's part of my work. When I'm not working at the church, my other work is actually as a childbirth educator and doula, which is a labor support person, someone who's alongside women in labor and birth, and that's basically just what it sounds like. I come alongside women in labor and birth as emotional support, physical support, and then I also do classes in childbirth and breastfeeding support. So
that's awesome.
Those are some things that I do.
Yeah, and it's a pretty unique space. I don't think I've actually met somebody who their two vocations are like childbirth education doula and then also family pastor. So what was kind of the path that took you to those things? Did you know for a long time you wanted to be involved in them, or was it sort of a gradual thing?
It was very gradual. I think I see them really similarly in some ways, though, because to me, even the role of a pastor is someone who just comes alongside another person. And I definitely do that in my work as a doula. I really feel like I love being alongside people as a source potentially for comfort, for courage, for hope, all of these things. And I feel like my work as a pastor is so very similar. I mean, the parallels are just uncanny when it comes to thinking about coming alongside someone, what that means, and especially in the work of God in the church and in God's people. It's a funny, analogy to use, but when God is birthing something in people, bringing transformation and new life, it's a lot of the same things that women actually go through in the actual labor and birth experience. And so for me, I feel very much kind of at home in both places. It is something that came to me gradually. I think being a family pastor grew out of my experience in family and really wanting that kind of support for myself and my own family, and then wanting to give that to others. And then similarly in childbirth, it really grew. I did not know that I would be so fascinated and interested in childbirth until, lo and behold, I was pregnant. And then I really thought it was this amazing, crazy, wonderful, hard experience that I really hadn't heard much about ever in lots of circles. You know, it just isn't something that's talked about that much. And I thought that was a shame, because it was this really significant, very significant, and I would say sacred, you know, season of my life, and the birth of my daughter. And I just thought, wait, why don't I know more about this? And why don't women know more about this, and men and everyone? Because it's really this unique and kind of, well, unique in some ways, unique in the span of our lives, and yet unique in that we come into the world this way, and so not unique that way. And I wanted to be part of that, be part of helping families in that season.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you sorry. I appreciate what you said about how like pregnancy and birth is not something that's talked about a lot in our culture, and like just the importance of bringing something that can seem very private maybe to people, but has just a really big impact on people's lives, both like physically but also like, I'm sure, again, I have not been pregnant and I don't have any kids, right? But I'm sure it must also just change how you think about a lot of things. And yeah, just the value of both people who have experienced it and are wanting to process it with others, but also people who can't experience it or who haven't experienced it, but who still could learn a lot. That's really valuable from that. So
one of the things that I do from time to time is I host evenings of birth stories where women get to share their birth stories. And we have had stories of all kinds, you know, again, all shapes and sizes. And we've also had not just like labor and birth stories, we've had adoption stories, we've had infertility stories, we've had stories of miscarriage and loss. And I love inviting all women of all different ages and seasons of life to come. And I thought it was so poignant. This one young woman, I think she was a college student, she came one evening to, you know, a few women had shared their stories, and she left and she said, I'm so glad I came. These were stories I didn't know I hadn't heard, because she never even knew these stories were out there in the world. And to me, that was really, really important, because it's not that they're the most important stories in the world, but it's that they're stories, and having a venue to share those, it seems really important.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just like lifting up voices, and that's awesome. I also really appreciated what you said about pastoring as like coming beside. I feel like a lot of rhetoric around pastoring, especially like in gender debates, like has a lot to do with like, well, this kind of person is able to be a leader, right? Or even like using the language of servanthood, like obviously sometimes very, very genuinely, but sometimes like as a way to say, well, I'm the best servant, so I should be in charge, right? Yeah, I think the idea of pastoring is coming alongside. It's like very healthy and very biblically based, and
it's really one of the ways that I think for myself it gets most. That's how my pastoral work is best expressed, and so I know that that's part of my calling and how I want to live that out.
Awesome. So what are so kind of we've talked about your kind of work experiences. What are the major ethnic, racial, geographic backgrounds that have shaped kind of your internal experience of all that work?
That's so interesting. So I grew up in California. I now find myself on the East Coast in New England. So that itself is a big cultural shift for me, but I'm definitely a Californian at heart. My father is from India. He came to the States when he was 18 or so to come for college, as did several of his other brothers. And my mom is white. And so they met in college and really, did this crazy thing, fell in love and got married, which was really unusual for my dad too, coming from a culture in which he was expected to have an arranged marriage. And so I grew up in a family in which I didn't even think about how it was multicultural or bicultural, at least. It was just the norm for me. And so it was very, very normal for me to be with all of my Indian aunties and to have lots of Indian food and to have my grandmother staying with us and celebrate the Indian holidays. And it was very normal to be with my mom's family doing kind of like, I don't know, other things too, you know, that seemed a little bit more normal to some of my friends, but I never even realized that I was growing up in this sort of unique blending of cultures. My dad, bless his heart, still has like a pretty strong, you know, Indian accent, and I never knew that. I never realized it as a kid. And I remember one of my friends one time, we were sitting in the back seat of the car, my dad was driving us somewhere, and he leaned back and he asked us something, and I responded, and my friend said, "What did he say?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Why can't you understand him?" And it was the first time I realized, oh my goodness, my friends can't understand what my dad is saying. He has this accent. And so I think the ways that has shaped me is that I feel very comfortable moving from different cultural spaces and contexts. And so I learned how to do that at a young age, I think. And what that's meant for me is that I have loved being among folks of different cultures too. And it was interesting. I think I use the word sometimes like a third culture, where you don't stand completely in this culture nor in this other culture, but kind of on the outside in a different kind of culture, this third culture. And I think that I really identify in that space a lot. And I think sometimes that space can feel lonely, but often I think I used to feel more like it was a lonely space, and now I think I feel like it's a privilege to be able, because it really does allow me kind of entry to come alongside again someone here in the space, but then perhaps also in a different kind of space altogether as well. And I really love that. So that's a little bit, some of the backgrounds. We also, my husband and I lived in Istanbul, Turkey for 3 years. And living there, again, as the way I look, a lot of people would mistake me for Turkish. And in a lot of places I travel, actually, that happens. So when I've traveled in other parts of Central America and Central Asia, also, people will say, "You're from here, right?" And then I open my mouth to speak, and then, of course, it's a dead giveaway that I'm an outsider. But it allows me somehow this like insider-outsider perspective still, and that has been a great blessing to me as well. And our time in Turkey, I think, shaped me in real significant ways as well, because we lived in a very Turkish neighborhood. There weren't a lot of other foreigners there, and so we felt our outsiderness a lot. But then we also were adopted into families in a really beautiful way that was very meaningful to us and taught us a lot about hospitality and faith and all kinds of things. So
yeah, that's awesome. I've been thinking a lot lately about like multi-ethnic, racial, cultural belongings, and again, just like how diverse obviously those experiences can be, but like also that third space you were talking about, and again, like how that can feel like isolating, but also very connecting in some way.
Right.
And I think that like multiracial like identity is one way like of experiencing that, but I think there's a lot of other ways that are maybe harder to name, but like even like experiences within states, within countries.
Absolutely.
I think it's a very real part of like kinds of human experience that a lot of times we don't have the language to kind of talk about.
It's interesting because I was thinking my husband actually relates to this as well. My husband's white, but he grew up in a neighborhood in which whites were the minority, and there were a lot of Filipino Americans, African Americans. Like it just was this really multiracial neighborhood where he was a minority. And what it meant was that he learned to really go between spaces and people. And to this day, I think my husband can make friends with anyone on the planet. Like he's just really, really good at that. I think it's meant that he's had to do more work to understand who he is and what his identity is and where his belonging is, because he can feel like a belonger in a lot of different spaces, but not totally a belonger there either. And I think that has been a gift to him as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Well, okay. How do you think your work in ministry in particular has been impacted by your identity as a multiracial woman of color, which would also include like your experiences traveling like outside of the United States or in different like states in the United States?
I think that's hard. I think my multicultural or my experiences living among cultures different from my own has shaped a lot of the way that I think about ministry. I think being in different churches, honestly, has shaped a lot of the way that I think about ministry, certainly living overseas in a context when we lived in Turkey, 99% of the country is Muslim. And so we were in a very small minority as Christians. And that has really shaped me because it's helped me to understand just where other people are coming from. It's given me tons and tons of respect. Our Muslim neighbors were among the most hospitable, kind, generous people that I've ever met to this day, and taught me a lot even about what it is to be a person of faith and devotion. And I think that was really important. And I found myself naturally upon coming back to the States in the role of a bridge builder, because I would come back into like a church context and they would, have so many questions for me about what were they like over there, and a lot of negative stereotypes and fear. And I got to really break down a lot of that and tell like these very personal stories and real stories of what our lives have been like there. Similarly, in our experiences traveling in other parts of the world where maybe there weren't a lot of Americans, and not a lot of Christians, I've had the same experience, of people asking me, are all Christians like this? And what do Americans think about this? And being able to just be a real live person, right? To talk to face and to make these relationships. And so to me, the relationship building part of ministry too is so important because I saw that what a single person to person relationship could do in terms of breaking down barriers, building understanding and peace. And part of the work that we did kind of coming out of our travels was my husband and I, together with some others, helped to found a peace building organization really that does a lot of work with just helping to promote dialogue so that we can talk with one another. I think that influences a lot about just how I see ministry, in everyday life too.
Yeah, that's something that we're, CBE, Voices of Color, is also really interested in thinking about, like reconciliation, right? And like how to have those spaces, right, where people can be honest with like the questions or the statements that they want to express, right? In a way that like facilitates learning and doesn't result in violence, right? Just how to cultivate the posture of just respect for voices and being willing to be wrong even, right? And also like being willing to be in dialogue with people whose questions might be like very hard to hear.
Absolutely. I think that's so important because one of the things that I appreciated when we lived in Turkey, and I still appreciate to this day, is, all of my Muslim neighbors they were not shy about the fact that they wanted to convert me, right? They really did. They really believed. And so it was this great, open, honest space where we could both be honest about like, well, these are the things I believe, and they're different from the things that you hold dear to your heart. We have some common ground. Let's see what that is. But we're also not trying to pretend to be the same. We didn't have to be the same to still love and respect the other person. And I think that was really, really important to me. I was accepted as I was. Still, they still wanted to persuade me, and I have to be honest, there were things I wanted to persuade them about, but we could still have this dialogue, and more than even dialogue, we really had friendship together, which was really lovely.
Cool, that's awesome. Do you feel like that kind of like bridge making and like dialogue kind of experiences that like have been opened up in ministry. Do you think that is something that you found like in your work in childbirth education and being a doula and like in other like jobs you've had related to that? Or do you feel like those experiences have been different at all?
Yeah, that's funny. I know, because they seem so different, don't they? And yet I find that a lot of the same skills or values that I really became mine through those experiences continue to show up in all of these different spaces. I teach like an early parenting class, and I think parenting is one of those, there's like religion that we just, and then like parenting, there's like some real battles, right? And it's something that's so close to our heart, and people have very strong feelings about it. And I think when I'm in that space, what I want to say to people is, you don't all have to be the same in this space, this is a space for us to talk about what's important to each of us and to our families. We're going to talk about those things together, and then we're gonna decide, how we want to do that. And so I think in that regard, some of those peace building or bridge building kinds of skills or values come into play there. But I can't think as a doula how they probably do, unless I'm working out some conflict or something like that.
Yeah, that's super interesting to mention, right? How like parenting styles is like you can kind of think of like, you don't talk about religion, money, like gender, sexuality, like these are all the inflammatory topics in conversation. But it's also very true, like if you have a conversation about like hot parenting topics, oh my goodness, yeah, that would be really like a side of conflict, and just that we don't often, might not even be cognizant of the fact that that is something that's so dear to a lot of people's hearts, and that it is something to tread carefully with as you're just having conversations about that. And again, how it just impacts people's life in a huge way. Isn't really necessarily on our radar.
And they brought in, I think, with parenting and with so much, right? I think the experience that I've had in these kind of cross-cultural situations does help me, because, every family unit has its own kind of culture, and whether we realize it or not, we've been steeped in our particular family's culture. And so when you come as two separate people, perhaps then to parent, you both come from these very different cultural backgrounds, even if maybe your ethnic cultures are the same, your ethnic identities are the same. And I think it's really important to kind of work some of those things out and be able to recognize them, and then pick, okay, this I want to keep, this I don't want to, or this is what's influencing me, or this is what's going to be my default setting unless I choose otherwise. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you ever have experiences in your parenting, like classes or more just informal conversations, where you find that do you feel like people often will draw on like the Bible or their religious traditions in order to justify the parenting styles that they've chosen, or do you feel like people are not often necessarily explicitly saying that, whether it's
I don't hear it very much explicitly. I think more often than not, it's their own childhood experiences and family experiences that are influencing them. And then from time to time, just kind of this vague general sense that you ought to do this, and very rarely do I hear people having real specific commitments to a certain way of parenting, because I think sometimes it just isn't something we think that much about. It just sort of is kind of like the water we swim in, and so we don't think about it very much. So I don't get that very much. I think that one of the exercises that I do with expecting parents is like just a values clarification exercise that helps them as two parents, and I've done this with single parents as well, just go, what are the things that matter most to you? And when you think of your family, what do you want your family to be characterized by? And then I think you see a lot of like some of the undergirding foundations, so someone might say faith, or someone might say grace or forgiveness, or these things that perhaps they do have kind of religious or faith underpinnings to them. But I think that that's a really nice way for people to name, okay, actually we want to be a family of love, courage, and humor, you know? And then it's like, I tell them to pick 3 and to go put them on the refrigerator and like see how they stick. And then will those things help guide you as you're making decisions as a family?
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm like, right, so obviously I'm young and like have no idea whether children are in the future, but I feel like I'm like, even right, like talking about this makes it be on your radar, like as a young person or as a person who doesn't have kids and thinking about like, what would I want my 3 like
words
you know?
to be, exactly. And what if my 3 words are really different from, you know, my partner's 3 words, and what do we do then? So it's always a really fun exercise to do, because there's a lot of negotiation involved too, which I think is fantastic, you know, that there are things that we negotiate together.
Okay, so did you ever have questions as you're going into ministry more formally, whether you as a woman could be a pastor and a teacher, and like were there people in your life who helped like clarify that for you if it was a question, or like were there people who made it like not be a question at all because it was assumed?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think so in terms of like what I witnessed, I came to the church and to faith when I was a teenager, so it wasn't a place where I grew up understanding what women could do or not do. I grew up with a mom who very early on wanted me to know what the Equal Rights Amendment was and how women still weren't being paid, you know, the same as men, and how unjust this was. And so it was never really a question to me about what I could do and what I couldn't do. That said, when I came in to the church, I saw a lot of white male pastors. You know, that's who pastors were. And so for me, even to wrap my imagination around what would it be like to have a woman as a pastor, I couldn't do it. You know, I just couldn't even imagine it. This is why now I understand how important representation is, and that people can see women in lots of different positions, you know. So I think it was a journey for me of understanding and of exploring and of talking with people, with really lovely, faithful people who held vastly different thoughts on it, you know, and who really went to the scriptures in different ways, and who brought things out of the scriptures in different ways. I think being in kind of cross-cultural experiences probably really helped me to see. I think women in the church often find a lot of freedom when they're in other places serving, and so in our experience with parachurch ministries and things like that, where we saw it's not quite a church context, and so women could take on different leadership roles. I think that was really exciting for me to see. And then to be honest, I just have the most supportive husband in the world, who really called out in me the gifts that he saw too, and then coming into the church where I am now, similarly, just being surrounded by people and having leaders who were supportive and who could see, and I don't want to say they saw and I didn't see, but who could come alongside. There's that word again, me and where God was calling me. So, awesome. It's been great. I love where we are right now.
All right. I guess so are there, maybe let's actually do this question next. So what has it been like for you to be a pastor in a congregation that's very ethnically diverse and has a commitment to like just multiple kinds of diversity and welcoming in like a broad like swath of people?
It's so interesting, and I think it's a place where I have a lot of growing to do and learning, and that's exciting to me. I love the fact that we're really a multi-ethnic church right now, and to me that has enormous potential, and there's exciting possibilities. And I think, oh gosh, like what are the hard things we're really going to run up against? And to me, I think that's something I'm still growing in understanding. It's fantastic to me that we have so many voices, and one of the things I love is that so many of my brothers and sisters in church come from really different backgrounds. They come from really different church backgrounds too. And so having a lot of African Americans in our community, I've learned so much more about the Black church in America, and I'm grateful and humbled because I just am grateful and humbled about that, you know, and I feel really, really thankful. I think we need to open up more spaces to just share, you know, and dialogue. I've been thankful for the spaces we are trying to do that in, the dialogue and conversations we're having about racial inequity and injustice in our society, in the church, and our justice systems, you know, all of that. I think we have a long way to go. And I think that it doesn't just happen. I think we have to really, I think that again, those person-to-person relationships, perhaps that again is something that I'm bringing from my experience, but I think that they're just so important. Hearing one another's stories, the stories we didn't know we hadn't heard, you know, that is really, really exciting to me. And so it's not something that I see myself leading in any way, but again, but participating in and wanting to kind of, if possible, like fan the work that God is doing here, because I think there is a lot of potential for reconciliation, for something really beautiful. I mean, I really believe that we see more of the glory of God in the faces of one another, in all of this diversity, and in being able to see what is beautiful and what is the image of God in one another. So that excites me.
I appreciate what you said about like having different people with different like church or denominational or religious backgrounds, in terms of like we often hear like, oh, church hours and those segregated hours week or whatever. And just in terms of, obviously those spaces are a place, right, that hopefully change will happen, but also just drawing people from different church traditions automatically means, right, that you have people who have a higher chance of having just more like ethnic, racial, class, etc. diversity in terms of the little clusters that have formed in church communities when they're all brought together, right? Then you just have more experiences in that. Absolutely. Are there any figures in the Bible or biblical texts or broader religious traditions or ideas that you feel like have been especially encouraging to you, either as a woman of color specifically, or kind of in the bridge making, like community transformation through conversation? Like, just what are the things that encourage you and inspire you?
That's a great question. I mean, it's Holy Week, right? And so just reading through even from Palm Sunday on through the Last Supper and the Garden and the Crucifixion and the Resurrection, and all the women's voices who were there, and all the women who were there, is really, really encouraging to me. So I think the life of Jesus is far and away kind of a place of great encouragement to me as a woman. And I think early on in my faith formation, I spent a lot of time in the Bible looking at the way that God spoke about the nations, and that was really fascinating to me, because I could see from the very beginning to the very end that God's goodness and God Himself was for the nations. That it was not just, and that the nations were, that the nations were not an accident, or the nation, you know, that in this difference and in all of these various ethne, that God was really up to something. And that, I think, continues to encourage me. I love seeing what a flourishing faith and what following Jesus looks like in, you know, the far corners of the earth. What could this look like there? You know, how could this take shape? What are the things that are the same? You know, kind of what are the things that carry through, and what are the things that are adapted in these different places? And I find that really, really interesting and encouraging, because I know that we can't kind of constrain what this one thing looks like, you know, but that it's much bigger and grander than we can kind of imagine. And so I like the notion, when I look in the Bible, it kind of expands my imagination to think of, what is it? What do these words in Revelation about all the tongues and tribes and nations? You know, what does that actually look like, and what does that mean? It gives me a lot of hope for what God's doing now. I think in lots of different multi-ethnic and multiracial spaces. Not that it gives me all the answers, but it certainly gives me inspiration that this is. That no one ethnicity or race or nation has kind of got it all sealed up and has got the corner on the market when it comes to what it means to be a follower of Jesus.
I love that, especially because like one big aspect of colonialism, right, has been enforcing a very narrow kind of Christianity, like upon groups, which involves both eradicating really rich cultural traditions, right, but also stifling like Christianity in terms of how like many, like infinite different ways it can be expressed, and like identifying that like the push to like cultivating that richness of like different expressions is like in the text, and is not something we have to be like, well, like God didn't know, like in the Bible, like we have to like add it on, right? Like it's in the text already.
Absolutely.
And also what you were saying, right, about how the nations, right, are included from the beginning to the end of the story, right? Like sometimes I think we can fall into the trap of like, oh, well, back in the Old Testament, or like back with Judaism, they used to be so exclusive and narrow-minded and only one people, but then we had Christianity, and now Christianity solved and brought everybody in and was an inclusive religion, right? And identifying that inclusivity, like all the way through the tradition, and like including the Jewish roots, like had that inclusivity in it already, rather than saying, like, oh, it was Christianity that brought that, and that's what makes it different. It's I think also really
absolutely. I think I mean, I always love looking at the story of Abraham, who was blessed to be a blessing, and I think that a blessing to the nation. Well, my goodness, like that actually means good things for a lot of people you don't know, people that are not like you. And I think that's wonderful. And I also was thinking, I think the book of Acts, right, is the early church struggling with so many of these issues, you know, and it's so cool to see what comes of that, and the different ways that they wrestle with it. And then how they see, you know, the young church flourishing.
That's awesome. Okay, so I just have one more question for you. Do you have any advice for people who are working to create more mutual and diverse communities of faith? And obviously that's a big question, right? And you can't know all the specifics, but there's a lot of people, right, especially who are part of our group, right, who are wanting to push towards like justice and reconciliation and more like diversity in conversation. So do you have any just suggestions for people who are wanting to know, like, how can I start doing this more, or like how can I like go even deeper in this?
Meet some people who are different from you, hear their stories. A very formative experience in my life came one summer. I was working in a kind of inner city, you know, mission sort of thing, and the organizers of this, we were young college students who had for the most part come out of like, you know, middle class evangelical churches, and they said, you know what we're going to do this summer? Every Sunday we're going to put you in a different church. And you're not going to know the language, and they're going to worship in an entirely different way from you, and you're going to see what this is like. And it was one of the best. It was the best. It was definitely out of my comfort zone. When they're singing in Cambodian, and I don't know what is happening here. This doesn't sound like any music I've heard before, and the food is all different, and the way we do this is all different. And, but it was amazing. And I think just being a listener and being a learner, and I kept my mouth shut for a lot of that, didn't think I had all the answers, and I just could learn. And I think that was it's such an invaluable experience. At the time, I thought they were crazy for making us do it, but now I'm so grateful that they did, because it really, really shaped us in unique ways. And then as we were serving in different communities that summer and really seeking to be people of peace, it gave us more insight. It also just helped us, again, to have those relationships and friendships with people that were mutual. They weren't, you know, here I am to rescue you, or here I am to save you, but that really were more about mutuality. So I think that people to people, you know, having those conversations, risking having conversations too, where you do speak truly about who you are and what matters most to you. I think it can be, sometimes we think in order to build relationships with people who are different from us, we kind of have to check our identity at the door. And I don't think that's true. I think that's actually a disservice to a true relationship. You know, I think we should come with all of who we are. We just need to be better at listening and speaking. You know, listening really, truly, and speaking truly. And I think that goes a long way too.
Well, awesome. Thank you. I don't know if there's anything else you had on your mind that you wanted to share.
No, I'm just
awesome.
Grateful for this.
Thank you. Do you mind if we close in prayer? Okay. So I'll start, and then you can think about it. Okay. Dear God, thank you so much for this evening that Asha and I were able to have this awesome conversation that we were able to share with everyone. Thank you so much for all the exciting things that you are doing in her life right now, and that you've brought her to this path, and also just all the experiences she's had that have enriched her to be better placed to just be partnering with the work that you're doing in our community right now. And just thank you for her presence and for her work in our lives here in New Haven. And I pray that her words that she shared with us would take root, and that we would, just all be better off having thought about all of this, and that you would just continue to bless her and to help her grow in all the passions and the callings that you've placed on her heart.
God, thank you for Haley and for her work and her heart. God, thank you for people and for this world that you created. God, thank you for the ways that we see you in one another, that we see you in the different stories that we get to share with each other. We see you expressing your love, your goodness, your grace, all throughout history, throughout the scriptures. And in these different sorts of churches and faith communities. God, I thank you that during this Holy Week, we can see you also just expressed in the life of Jesus. I pray, God, that you would bring even greater reconciliation where there's brokenness, where there's hurt, where there's injustice. God, I pray that you would bring your perfect healing and justice, God, so that we could see your glory and be part of seeing your kingdom come here on earth. I pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Haley, before we close, there was just one thing as I was praying that I thought about that I think has been pretty important. Sorry to add it on here at the end.
Thank you.
But that our church has spent a lot of time in the last 2 years in mourning. And in lament. And I think that this has been a really key part. I don't want to make it sound like this journey is all happy, and that there's nothing really difficult about it, because I think one of the things that God is doing in us as a community is teaching us how to grieve what's broken, and how to grieve injustice, and how to sit in lament. And to say something is not right, and to be okay saying something is just not right. It's just not right. And it's a really uncomfortable place to be and to sit for a long time, but he seems to keep bringing us there over and over. And I think I think it's at least a process, I think, of a step in the process also of repentance, of saying we're lamenting what's broken. What is our part in what's been broken? Where have I not seen my brother or sister rightly? Where have I not cared? You know, what the things that I've done, the things I've left undone, and I think that that's been an important part of things too. So not to leave us on kind of a down note, but I want to say I just think that upon reflection, that's been a really, really important piece of things as well.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because actually, like, that was when I, like, for the parts that I've been, like, participated in that, mainly in, like, Sunday church services, and also, I guess, home groups, like, that has felt really distinctive. Like, I felt like, I feel like I had not encountered in other church communities, like, the space for prolonged repentance tied with just mourning, like, both as someone who suffers because of injustices, but also, like, for your part, like, in causing it as well, or being complicit in it as well. And of course, I'm sure other traditions have done that. Just this one, like, the way that it happened really stood out to me, and strikes me as important in terms of just, like, the health of people who are aware of the ways that injustices are, or even if you're not aware but you're still experiencing it, of course. It just strikes me as very important for us to learn in a community, like, how to process those emotions, and even feel the freedom to process them in a culture that often says, like, you should not, like, have emotions, and if you do have them, they should only be positive emotions, and, like, especially in conversations about, like, race and gender, like, the ability to express, like, your lament over injustice is sometimes seen as, like, a sign that you are not, like, processing it correctly, right? And just opening up space that for affirming the validity and truth of what people are feeling, and intentionally using your emotions to cultivate kind of actions.
Absolutely.
And postures,
not running from that. I think we're just, I think as a church, I hope here in America too, we're learning how to sit in those uncomfortable spaces a bit longer, and to really learn what it means to come to grieve with those who are grieving, to mourn with those who are mourning, and to rejoice with those who are rejoicing, but to let ourselves be there. And I mean, I'm encouraged by all of Scripture also shows us that this is a place where God's people are called to lament and to repent and to mourn. And so I think that that's probably a really important part of this too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to all who were able to join us, either live or afterwards. And yeah, thank you so much, Asha, for being here with me tonight. And yeah, thank you to all of you. We're going to sign off now. Goodbye.